Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
It's time for your weekly dose of inspiration and strategy from the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Before I kick off today's episode, if you love this show and listen every week, please hop on over to iTunes and consider leaving this show a review. It helps other people interested in similar content be able to find this show and benefit from all of the great tips that you have already heard. Today's guest wants you to consider one question. What if you could determine who in your audience is your best client in 180 seconds? Juliet Clark is a dynamic and sought-after speaker and podcaster who has spent the last 20 years helping authors, coaches, speakers, and small businesses all over the world build expert platforms. She created a platform building tool that assesses audience obstacles, generates leads, and qualifies leads for businesses. And she says her simple technology can be used from the stage, on social media, and at workshops to create conversations that build long-term relationships. She's also the host of the Promote, Profit, and Publish podcast, which helps entrepreneurs understand how to use great tools in the coaching and small business spaces. Thanks again for tuning in. Welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. My guest today is Juliet Clark, and we're going to be talking all about lead generation, lead qualification, and how to make that process easier for you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. This is a hot topic for a lot of freelancers. I'd love if we could hear just a little bit about your background and how you kind of became so knowledgeable about lead qualification and lead gen.
So out of college, I started out in traditional publishing, and I went on to work in advertising on a couple $1 billion accounts with Chiat. And from there, I went to being a stay-at-home mom. It lasted 2 weeks. It was really hard.
That is a hard job.
It's a hard job. And so I decided that I could balance my time between there and real estate. And the one thing that I carried through all of those was that you had to pre-qualify before you worked with people. And you also had to build a really solid avatar and test and validate that avatar over and over and talk to those people. And so in 2007, I was going through a divorce, and I wrote my first book, and it was a mystery novel. I killed my ex-husband in it. It was very cathartic. But what came from that experience, besides not having to wear a felony orange jumpsuit, because it was metaphorically killing him in a book, was that when I went to publish my first book, I found a self-publishing model that was horrendous. It did not serve authors at all. So I started my own company, and then within that, we had entrepreneurs bringing us a book, and they had written the book because their products and services weren't selling. And someone told them that, the book is the answer. It's why nobody knows you. And I kind of said, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
This is going to be another failed product. So we developed, we worked with, I found a platform that I really loved, and we started developing assessment marketing that was also lead generation. And as we got better and better over time with it, we put components in that were also qualification, so that when the people are working with the assessments, they're actually pre-qualifying themselves for your business.
I think that is such an important thing to consider, that you have lead qualification processes built in, both when people are coming to you. So if they're landing on your website, your landing pages, they're finding you, some other way, but also when you're doing outreach with them. Where do you think most people get things wrong with lead qualification?
So there's a couple of things. My experience when I was in real estate was there were always a couple guys in the office who'd be like, I have 60 leads, and they never closed anything.
Yeah.
And I had a really great team of people. We were selling about 60 houses a year, and we pre-qualified everybody. You didn't get in a car. You didn't it went nowhere. And it was such a huge difference in what we closed every year. So I think that pre-qualification, we go out and we collect leads, but we don't really find out how interested they are. So that's one of the things. The other thing is it's easy for you to explain what you do and develop a product, but if you don't validate it first and know who that audience is, you can't replicate it for lead generation. So you have to be able to not only build that avatar, but validate it.
How would you recommend that somebody validate it if they're like brand new to starting their business? How do you figure out that this idea you have, this service or product has legs?
So this is the second time I've had to answer this today. One of the things, and I know with freelancers, they work with a lot of coaches, authors, speakers, small businesses.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that business model is what I call bootstrap to bankruptcy. Yeah. Because there are all these things that you need to be successful, and one of them is not validating that product.
Right. Yeah.
So that's actually what we use the assessments for. We tell people that are brand new, like, we're your first stop. You have an idea. Let's get you out on a stage or networking or wherever it is. Let's create this based on success principles and let them tell you if it's a valid product, if they would pay money for it. Because you get a lot of lip service about, oh, I really love that. Yeah. And then nobody will pay anything for it. So I'd rather see you spend a couple $1,000s and validate than go out and hire that book coach and an online marketing coach and all of those things that are going to cost you, anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 to do. Then I'd rather see you validate first.
Yeah. And I see this a lot too with other authors. So I also do some freelance public relations work for nonfiction business book authors. And it drives me crazy how many of them come to me and say, I published my book 3 months ago and it's not selling at all. And I'm like, why are we waiting until 3 months after the book is launched to think about these kind of things? Did anyone even want to read that book to begin with? And like how much opportunity we've lost by you spending a year or 2 years of your life working on this thing. And then it's the two parts of it. Like, did it ever have legs to begin with? Was it ever validated? And then also, how can we make sure that that follow through comes all the way through the process, right? Like, we can't just stop when you created the product. You have to build in your customer service. You have to build in your marketing, and all those pieces have to be in place. I think a lot of people do struggle with lead qualification too, because especially when you're doing something like cold outreach. So that's something a lot of freelancers do. They say, I want to work with Procter and Gamble or whatever. So they go do their research. They dig for hours to try to find the CMO's email address, write this custom pitch, and get in there. And then they're sort of like, they forget about that lead qualification process. Just because it was a big name or a cool company.
Oh, yeah.
They still might not be your right client. So can you talk a little bit about, especially on a phone call, because that's usually the next step for a lot of freelancers, what information can you be asking for or listening for on a phone call to determine if a lead is not the right fit? So you've done your base level of investigation about this company or person. You think there's possibility to work together. Now we're on the phone call. How do I make sure about that before we sign a contract?
So a lot of what we do inside of enrollment conversations is really talking to them about what's worked, what isn't working. What have you tried to get it to work? Really diving into that. The reasons for those conversations, even though they seem a little invasive, is you're going to find out a couple things, and they may not actually verbalize those things. You have to get really good at listening. So I'll give you an example. When someone comes to us, we ask those kinds of questions, and we might find out that they're blaming it on somebody else they worked with. But when you really get down to it and do some heavy listening and digging, you'll find out that the person you're talking to didn't take action.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they didn't follow through. And so you're really listening for those patterns when they're telling you about those experiences, because they will tell you a lot. You'll find out if you have an action person or a blame person. You don't want that blame person at all.
That's so true. I think it's equally important to be listening to hear the right things and logging away those red flags that come up in those early conversations. Because just like you were talking about, one thing I always tell freelancers is it's a bad sign if you're on the sales call and they say, I've hired 15 other freelancers before and no one could do the job right. There is only one common denominator in those 15 projects, and it was the person who didn't give good directions, didn't pay on time, whatever it is that the client has done. So do you have tips for making that lead generation process faster for freelancers or any type of business owner?
So that's actually what we use that assessment for in depth, is we set the success principles of what we do. And then you measure, as the potential client, you measure where you're at in that. So we know not only how much help you need, but you have an understanding coming into the call how much help you need. Because sometimes I find that when we're pre-qualifying, people don't realize how much help they actually need. They think they go to that, they think they're doing better than they actually are. Mm-hmm. And for anybody, a freelancer, a business, that is a big red flag, because their expectations may be much higher of what you're going to do for them than what you actually commit to do for them.
Yeah. It's definitely important to know where they're at and where they want to go. Now, I use a loose form of pre-qualification for the freelancers that I coach. I kind of lay out in the sales page, this is the type of person I work with. These are the types of things we work on. And then I require that they do a brief phone call with me just to make sure that we're a fit beforehand. But I'm imagining that using something like a form where you ask questions could help pre-qualify people to see if they're the right fit. But what do you do with the people where you read it and you say, this isn't the right fit? Or you look at their information they've emailed to you. How do you, gracefully say, let's say you got a lead through your website that says, I want to hire you to do these freelance services, but you can tell it's not a fit for you and they didn't really pass your pre-qualification test. Where do they go from there? How do you respond to that professionally?
So usually I try to be a connector, and I will go back and explain to them, look, this is not really an area where we work well, and I can see you need help here. I know somebody, and give them a name and number. You should contact them and see if they can help you a little bit better. That doesn't mean that you're giving bad leads to someone else, but you genuinely may not be the person to do that work. And most of the time when we're referring those two, we're making a little bit of, referral fee off of it as well. So it's not a total loss. But here's the thing about it. When you do something like that, and we just had this conversation, in integrity, people come back and they send people to you because now they fully understand what you do, and they understand that you just didn't take their money and not deliver for the sake of taking their money. And that's huge when you're doing something like this.
I think it is really important. And I think one thing that you might never know is the people who land on your lead qualification page, who look at it and just in looking at it, realize that you two are not a fit and they don't even fill it out. So it's also doing a lot of that work for you by people can self opt out and go, oh, this has like 5 questions on it. I'm too busy to, answer 5 questions. If you're too busy to do that, we're never going to get anywhere on the project, or, anything else in that lead generation process can definitely help people realize this is right for me. This isn't right for me. Now, one thing I see all the time, not so much in the freelance world, but in other businesses, is this idea of buying leads. Now, is that something that's still relevant? I mean, I would think it's worth the extra time to find your own leads and then pre-qualify them. But then every so often I do see people selling these sort of lead generation services. They'll promise you a list of X many companies.
So here's the deal. Business is all about relationships. And that is one of the things when you and I initially talked that I told you in this click world out there, what we've developed is for relationship building. Mm-hmm. So when you go out and buy a lead, there are 3 different kinds of traffic out in the world. There is cold traffic, there is medium traffic, and there's hot traffic. Hot traffic is when, like, you have referred somebody to me, you vouched for me, you really need this person. That medium bit of traffic temperature is somebody who kind of knows you, is following you, trying to figure out what you're doing, and you're nurturing them. Those cold leads, they didn't ask to become a lead. For the most part. Or if you're in digital, they click. They don't really know you. A lot of times they've just clicked to click. So those people are really, really hard when you buy leads. And a lot of times when you go out and buy those, they're spam.
Yeah.
So they're actually ticked off that you're like, where did you get my name?
Yeah, take me off your list immediately.
Yeah. So now you have no chance of building rapport and relationships. So you should always go out and develop your own leads because you're the face of your business. You're the person that they're looking at. Are you credible? Are you, do you follow through and do what you say you're going to do? If I tell you when you hand me your card that I'm going to call you this afternoon, do I call you this afternoon? Or do I just, there's all of these things that they're evaluating that make it necessary for you to generate and pre-qualify your own leads.
It's such a great point because I think so many people are looking for that magic bullet, the easy answer of, oh, well, just give me a list of 10 or 50 companies that I can pitch. And I always say your odds of success are going to be so much higher if you make your own list of 10 companies you would like to work with and then do the research to see if on your initial review, they meet your lead qualification. It's just going to be so much more effective. The other thing I always wonder about those lead gen companies too is, let's say they have a list of 50 companies, but 2,000 people have bought that list of 50 companies. So now those people are really pissed off on that lead list because they're like, man, everyone under the sun is emailing me and I never wanted this information to be coming to me.
And that's such a great point because I have a lot of clients who are trying to get in to do corporate workshops.
Yeah.
And they think, okay, every corporation needs me. Do you have any idea how many times a day that HR person is hounded for a workshop to come in? So you have to, the best thing you can do if you want to get into those places is go to some place where you can network with those people. Can I share a tip?
Oh, please do.
So one of the things that I do, because I'm super sneaky, no, I'm not super sneaky, but is if I am going to an event and I want to meet the speakers or I want to do business with those people who have been vouched for that probably could use my services, I reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hey, we're going to the blah, blah, blah event. I can't wait to see you speak. And then walk up at the event, introduce yourself. Hey, I reached out on LinkedIn, and talk to them. But here's the bigger tip. Sit next to them at the event. Because inevitably, when you're sitting next to people, conversation starts or at their table or wherever, because that's where it all begins. That's where you get to make your first impression instead of an email or a solicitation phone call. Get out of the house and go network with those people that you really want to grab their business. And you may find out at those oh my gosh, that person's horrible. I really don't want to work there.
Yes, absolutely. And that tip about LinkedIn is so important because our email inboxes can get cluttered, but you can always do follow up on LinkedIn. You can do initial outreach on LinkedIn. And then, if you sit next to that speaker at that networking event and they post about having spoken, you remind them of who you are by commenting on that on their social media and say, hey, you did a great job. It was great to meet you. You want to keep staying in their world. And I think that is really, really important. So let's talk about sort of the beginner person who's sort of just starting out, realizing that they need to have a better process for capturing incoming leads. What would you say would be the first step that they need to take? I know, and where I'm going with this is a lot of freelancers go, oh, well, I can't launch my business yet because I don't have my website. A website that has no traffic to it is so useless. So just skip it. I always just you don't need that unless you have this massive following and you have massive traffic already. Then yes, let's optimize your website and make sure there's a place on there for people to hire you. But I would think it's probably not set up your website. I'm wondering if there's something else people can do to sort of be lead friendly.
So, how about a landing page?
Yeah.
It costs
so simple.
$50 to put up a landing page, talk a little about yourself, services, let's set an appointment.
Yeah.
So you can send people to that landing page. Also get out and start developing content. Because if people can see your articles, let's say, and this is just a strategy that I use, let's say that you and I had a conversation, or, we were going back and forth on LinkedIn a little, and you expressed an area you were having a little bit of trouble in. You may not hire me today, but wouldn't it be amazing if I served you by saying, you know what, Laura, I wrote an article about this topic. Can I share it with you? Leave the link and just kind of start developing from there. You're showing them your value instead of telling them how valuable you are.
And how many times do we see people doing the opposite? It is rampant on Facebook and LinkedIn. Help, I'm launching a podcast. Anyone have any good resources? And inevitably, 10 people respond, hi, I'm a podcast producer. Here's my services page. Go check it out. And it's like, I don't know who you are. You know what I mean? Right. If you were the person that left me the link that said, hey, here's this great resource I found, or I took this course, I read this book, I listened to this podcast, and it was awesome. And you continue to build that relationship. I feel like we're interacting as two humans rather than you just see me as somebody who can be pitched. And I think that that's really important. Like I always laugh how many people seem to think that it's as easy as you send a pitch or you get on a sales call, boom, contract signed, you've got the money, the company is in, the person is in. It still goes back to relationships. We live in a digital world, and digital technology enables us to do all that other stuff faster, but we still have to go back to relationships at the end of the day.
We do. And so this spring I have a book coming out, and it's actually called Pitch Slapped. Because that's what I feel like.
I love it.
That's what I feel like when I go and you do that to me. Like, especially those people who, LinkedIn, you connect with them and they say, hey, I've got this brand new program. Would you like it? And it's like, no, I don't even know who you are.
and half the time they haven't even done the research to see what it is you do. I've had people pitch me investment banking stuff. I'm like, did you even look at my profile? Like, I don't need investment banking. I'm not looking to have venture capital. My favorite though is the people who are subtly insulting with their pitch, where they're like, I know how hard it is to work out. You're like, oh my gosh, you're calling me out on my fitness or my nutrition or something. I'm like, not only have I been pitch slapped, as Juliet would say, but now there's like this undercurrent of like, you have flagged me as your ideal lead because you think I need to exercise or something. It's like,
you're looking through your pictures like, how big is my butt?
Exactly. What was it that made them think yes?
Here's my other thing. My pet peeve is men who who go through Facebook Messenger and they say, hey, I have this great new meetup. I help women manage their money. There is nothing. It's like when your husband tries to teach you how to play golf and tells you everything wrong, and you're not inspired by that. You want to hit him over the head with the club. No.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so crazy and this all goes back to that same topic of the proper lead qualification. Does this person want to hear your message? Are you reaching out in the most effective way to do it? Because maybe you do have some incredible supplement that burns fat, but there's a nicer way to go about it, or there's a more appropriate way to make sure that whoever you're targeting is the ideal person to hear that message, right? Like I might be willing to hear that at a networking event where they're just talking about their own experience using it. But if you're just showing up in my inbox and my DMs and you're sending all these messages that I didn't ask for. I mean, I actually have a rule. Like if someone does that to me on LinkedIn, I just remove the connection immediately. Yeah. If the first message is, hi, I sell XYZ, here's the link to buy it. I'd love to help you. I'm like, okay, remove connection. Like there is no connection between us because you didn't take the time to even get to know me or spend that time.
So I love to share this story. Someone did that to me. They wrote me a birthday message. And this was like in 2016. Really nice message. Hey, happy birthday. You deserve all the best in life. Love to help you get healthier in your next year. And they signed it. So I wrote back, thank you. And then here came the sales pitch. That would have been okay, except 2017, exact same message. In 2018, I was at an event And the owner of this MLM said, my people are having a little problem with marketing. Do you think you can come in and talk to us? And I said, oh my gosh, I have this great thing on social media. And guess what? I've got this messenger inside of my presentation that is what your guy keeps sending me every single year. And he's like, no way. And I was like, yeah, I use you guys as an example inside of my presentation.
And you don't want to be the bad example that someone is using to say what not to do, right? It's like, in my mind, it wouldn't take that much more effort for them to send you a personalized message that at least varies it up every year, or, logs in a spreadsheet. Pitched her in 2017, didn't go anywhere. So let me not do that.
And remember inside Messenger too, that, when you get that message, you can see the message above that's identical from the previous year.
Yes, vary it up. That's another good point, because when you're doing this outreach to prospective clients, you want to vary it up. One of my most hated things with follow-up is when a freelancer sends a pitch and then they respond to that message when no one answers and says, hey, just following up on this. No, give the person a reason to read your message that they might not have seen initially. Right. So it's so important. Always a little bit of personalization, and goes back to that human connection. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear where people can go to learn a little bit more about you and what your company does.
So I'm going to give you one of my quizzes. Go over and take it and experience it. It's www.leadlogicquiz.com. And, check it out. See how you're pre-qualified right then and there.
Awesome. I love it. And that's such a great thing to close on. When you see someone else in your space or in another space who is doing things well and owns their expertise, go look at how they do it. You want to learn how great email newsletters get written, go sign up for somebody's list that has a 40% open rate and a high close rate. You want to learn about lead generation and pre-qualifying, go look at how Juliet has set up her own pre-qualification on the quiz there. So you can always take lessons from other people who are doing things right. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and to connect